This time when Alain woke up, he knew what to expect, even though he'd fallen asleep early after eating. Asita and Tinus slept next to him in his own bed, which meant they had taken him to it after he fell asleep. There was a vague memory of getting into bed, so it could have been he was barely awake enough to get to his pod while they supported him. Either way, he was pleased the miracle cure worked because his headache was as good as gone and most of the muscle aches as well. The peaceful look on the girls' faces was pleasing as well, but the wish to get really close to them tightened his chest, especially when he looked at Tinus. The image of her as a cute sylph woman clashed with the physical reality, and unlike the clear preference when it came to humans, he couldn't deny he was still attracted to her. He couldn't see her as anything but a fluffy female with cute personality and feel the same attraction for her as he did with Asita. He groaned inward at the curse of having fallen for two creatures he'd never imagined he'd fall for. An urgent buzzing tore him from his train of thought, and the girls woke up startled. "What's that?" asked Asita as she sat up at once. Alain leaned over Tinus to pick his tablet from a recess in the wall, the sensation of her body against his only lasting for a second before his mind went into emergency mode. He punched up the console from the wall curea and silenced the buzzer while reading the log entry that triggered it. "Oh crap!" Asita moved closer to him. "What is it?" "The wall curea detected incoming projectiles," Alain said and pulled up the area chart. "Multiple incoming at high speed, probably comet debris." Tinus sat up next to him. "Straight for us?" "We're in the target radius of 400 kilometers. "How much time?" asked Asita. 6 standard days, she hissed. "We have to evacuate." "But where to?" asked Tinus. "If we escape with our pods, we can't go far on our fuel reserve, and heading to the nearest Sylph outpost takes too much time." "There's still some fuel left on the Walcurea. We could escape with that. But I don't want to abandon this place and have to return to Earth if the debris does hit the ships and destroy them," Alain said while he rechecked the detection system. "I don't want to leave you in our home." Asita's heart skipped a beat at the sight of his serious face. She didn't want to return to Sylph and the unhappy existence that would await her there. "What other option do we have?" "Can't we deflect or evade the debris?" asked Tinus. "Can't we use the weapons or the shields of the warships?" Alain shook his head. "Only part of the shield works on the Walcurea. It won't cover the Amaroth or us, and even if I could get the cannons to shoot makeshift projectiles, it's too little to make an impact on the debris. It would likely just make things worse by turning larger pieces into clouds of smaller pieces." He sensed her grip on his arm and the urge to protect her, and Asita grew stronger. "What can we do?" he thought while he looked at the cone of the target area displayed on his tablet. "Could we give this whole thing a push with the fuel we have?" asked Asita. Alain looked at her. "We could push it with the pod thrusters, but they're too weak." "And the Walcurea? You can control it. Can't you control the engines?" Alain pondered. "I could fire them, but it would cause a rotation and probably not get us out of the way. We need to control the Amaroth as well." Tinus looked at Asita. "The engine controls are damaged in a few places, but we could replace those components." "But the Amaroth has barely any fuel left," said Asita. "What if we collect all from the emergency pods? There are plenty of them." Asita did a quick calculation in her head. "Then we'd still be short when I base it on the average fuel capacity of the pods." "I saw fuel pods on the Walcurea," said Alain. "If we're lucky, there's fuel left in them, and together with the pods from the ship, it might be enough to fuel both warships." Asita looked at him. "Our fuels aren't completely the same, but I could adjust the engine controls to run on a mix." She looked at Tinus. "If we work continuously, we might make it." Tinus nodded. "Yes, I don't want to return to Sylph. I'd rather risk my life to stay here." They looked at Alain. He wanted to pull them close and kiss them, but this wasn't the time. "We have work to do," he said. Asita and Tinus began on replacing the damaged circuits and components of the engine control systems, while Alain checked the status of every fuel pod he could find, along with the emergency pods on both warships. He put down a list while they took their first scheduled break. Despite the emergency, they agreed on regular breaks to avoid exhaustion and risk making errors in their work. "Altogether, there's enough fuel to move," he said. "If we keep output moderate, we can clear the impact radius and still have some left to move further away if needed." "Good," said Asita when she looked at the ratio of the two fuels available for use on the Amaranth. As far as we can tell, we should be able to get the engine controls working, although we have to rig it in a few places because we don't have the exact same parts. Once that's done, we can try to recalibrate for the new fuel mix. I think we should decouple our home from the ships, said Tynes. If the forces on the impact wreckage are too large, it could warp the structure and damage our pods. Asita nodded and Alan looked at the drawing of the two ships he had made. Good point, he said. We can secure our pods to the ships with cables to keep them from drifting away. I could stay here and control the Walkyria from here, but I prefer to do it from engineering or the bridge. One of us needs to be on the bridge and the other in engineering for the Amaranth, said Asita. We'll just have to risk leaving our home unmanned. Alain leaned back in the couch. In worst case, we can still survive on the Walkyria. There are enough secure sections for that. It does mean the end of our cozy life, however, when they find out what happened. It's better than giving up now and leaving everything behind for certain. Alain felt the same and was ready to give it his all to secure their life together. He looked at the time. Better get some sleep now. We'll need to continue work soon. Asita nodded, hesitated for a moment, then spoke up. I think it's best if we sleep together again, to make sure we keep to our schedule. Alain looked at Tynes. That's not a bad idea if you don't have any objection. She shook her head quickly. I think that might be better as well. My bed then? I don't want to impose on your private spaces. The girls agreed and they went to their pods to change and crawled onto Alain's bed quickly after. He'd provided extra pillows and set 2 alarms to wake them up. I really hope we can make it, said Tynes softly. Alain gave her a reassuring smile and took her hand in his. We can do this. She smiled back, and Asita leaned on Alain's chest to put her hand on theirs. It might be a bad sign to say this when it comes to movies, but we either make it together or we don't. Alain put his other hand on hers. We will. The next days were filled with work on the warships, sleeping in short periods, and supporting each other, trying to wake up and staying alert and calm enough while the clock counted down to the estimated time of impact. They found comfort in sleeping together, but they still felt awkward when waking up and finding themselves snuggled together one way or the other. The pressure of the emergency distracted them enough to quickly forget about it, though. Alain was glad for it because he wouldn't have to think about controlling himself, while the girls didn't have time to deal with their feelings towards waking while snuggled up to a male or occasionally in his embrace. I need some help on replacing a relay box, said Tynes when she and Asita were almost done with replacing the defective engine control systems. I can't do it alone. I'm busy replacing a burnout circuit on one of the engines, said Asita. Alain, can you help? He clamped a fuel pod to the cargo picker. I can in a few minutes. Where are you? I'll send you the compartment number, said Tynes. Alain arrived a little later at the pressurized section Tynes was working in. He took off his suit and found her in a narrow area between 2 walls. There's a bunch of cables in front of the box, and I can't replace it without holding it in place, Tynes said as she gestured at the open section of the back wall. Alain moved up behind her and noted the shoe-sized box behind a bundle of various cables. Another marvel of smart design, he said dryly. Tynes chuckled once. I guess our technologies don't differ much. Yeah, I can show you some textbook examples on the Walkyria if you want. She giggled. Maybe after we're done with this whole thing, she said and turned to the box. Can you hold the box and keep the cables apart while I disconnect it and remove the brackets? Sure, he said and reached out to the cable to spread them and pressed against Tynes's back. Sorry, my arms aren't any longer. Tynes blushed a little. It's all right, there's not much room here. If it bothers you, I can do it later with Asita. I don't want to take away your precious time when I have more to spare, as long as it doesn't bother you. Tynes shook her head. Then I'll begin on disconnecting the cables. Alain held the box by its sides while the cables rested against the outside of his lower arms, and Tynes worked on the cable connections. Her back rubbed and pressed with every move against his chest, and Alain quickly felt his body heat up. The couple of times he woke up with either of the girls spooned against him flashed through his mind, bringing with it the sensations of their soft fur and their scents, things he had no time to explore when they had to get up and get to work. He thought it might be because they hadn't had the time to freshen up, or because he spent much more time closer to them. But her scent became more clear to him, and he unconsciously leaned his nose forward to the side of her neck to inhale it. Tynes tried to keep her mind on her work, but Alam, practically pinning her against the wall, and herself moving against him, interfered with images of him holding her tight, like lovers did in the movies they'd watched. Her heart began to pound, and she hoped her thick fur hid it from him. She didn't want to make him uncomfortable, because she wasn't someone according to his preferences. Alan tried to move his hips back, but that only caused him to lose his balance, so he had to keep them pressed against her behind. And slowly he sensed the rubbing of her tail and behind taking effect on him. He tensed his thighs to redirect his blood flow, but it was no use, and all he could do was hope she didn't notice. It should be a logical physical reaction to stimulation at the right places, but he couldn't deny the extra stimulation of her scent and the softness of her fur as her bare arms brushed against his. Even her tail seemed to wrap itself around his legs, and the times he imagined their fur against his skin wouldn't go away. As a human, he shouldn't even be attracted to a sylph, but he knew very well he did, and not just to Asitha, but Tynes as well. He had to face the fact that his weakness was cuteness, and Tynes's gender didn't matter to him. "Are you all right?" asked Tynes and pulled Alan out of his thoughts. He looked at the side of her face while she looked back at him. "Yeah, it must be because she looks so cute." He cleared his throat. "I'm all right. It's just a tiresome position to work in." She nodded. "I'm almost done removing the last bracket. Then we can remove the box," she said, while the shiver from his breath brushing her ear lingered along her spine. For a moment, she imagined him acting on his physical state and taking her from behind, and her heart raced with excitement before she suppressed it as best as she could. She decided to tell him she'd place the new box later so he wouldn't have to endure his embarrassment any longer. The last bracket came loose, and Alam pulled the box away. He placed it on the floor and sat in a squat to hide his state. "I can place the new box later," Tynes said softly. Alan looked at the new box. "You can't connect it now?" Tynes looked down. "I can, but won't it be a bother to you?" It would bother him in a certain way, but it would be a stupid reason to delay work in the current circumstances. He just had to endure it, and as long as she didn't notice it, he wouldn't have to make her worry. "I'll be fine," he said. "A few stretches will loosen me up again." Tynes blushed at the image in her mind. "Then, please hold the new box." She tried to move as little as possible, but her back still rubbed against his front, and they both tried their best not to think about anything but their current task, even if it seemed Alès kept his arms closer to hers and her tail wrapped tighter around his legs to keep her balance. She connected the last cable and was glad to finish the job, but she also regretted it. She leaned her head a little back, letting her back press a little more against him. "Done," she said softly. He let go of the box and flexed his fingers and hands. "Just in time," he said. "I was about to get cramps in my hands." Tynes took his hands in hers and massaged his palms with her fingers. "Thanks for helping me out." "Anytime," he said softly in her ear, and shivers went up and down her spine. She noticed he hadn't pulled away from her, and her heart raced when the thought of asking him welled up in her mind. Fear gripped her, but the urge to blurt the question out fought for dominance. "Alan," she whispered. "I'm done here," said Asitha over the communication link, and startled Alan in stepping back. "How's your end?" "Oh, we're done here," said Tynes and tried to restart her stopped heart. "Good. Only a couple of things left and we can run tests. I'm coming your way." "All right, we'll wait here for you," Tynes said, while Alan quickly collected her tools to call down. Asitha studied the documentation on the engines on the tablets in front of her in the engineering section of the Amaroth. "I think we need to adjust the nozzle throughput here and here," she said, and pointed at the parts on a diagram. Alan looked it over and hummed. "Sounds right to me. The design of these engines isn't much different than what we built." She looked up at the large fuel injectors at the side of one of the engines, then looked around. "Do you see anything to stand on? I believe there should be ladders, but it looks like they were taken." Alan checked the spaces between the engines. "Nothing here." She looked up at the engine again. "We'll have to go search for something then." Alan looked up. That would take too much time just for a quick adjustment, he said, and looked at her. I think it's quicker if you sit on my shoulders. That looks like the right height. Asita chuckled. Can you handle my weight? He nodded. I've been working out more since that thing with the bandits, he said, and tensed a little in lingering anger. I want to make sure I have at least some strength if it's needed for protection. Asita smiled a little. Yeah, she said. How do you want to do it? He helped her step up onto a console, stood with his back to her, and she sat down on his neck, wrapping her feet around his back. He wrapped his arms around her legs, tested his stance, and was glad for the training he did. How is it? She asked. He looked up with his eyes at her face. I've got you. Are you good? Yes. All right then, he said and stepped forward towards the engine. Let's get this done. We have 8 of these to do. Asita reached up to the injector. Can you get to it? Alan asked. Barely, but it's good enough, she said and adjusted the secured screw valve. Her movements caused her shirt to crawl up slowly, and Alan soon had to try and ignore the warm sensation in the back of his neck. But the soft sensation of her inner thighs against his cheeks didn't help with that. Don't think, he thought to himself. She's too busy to realize her shirt slipped up, so I should be too busy supporting her. Work! Focus on priorities! Asita thought as she tried to focus on getting the adjustment right. Alan's doing his best to support me in getting this done, and so should I. She bit her lower lip while the back of his neck ground firmly against her between her legs and sent tingles through her lower half. Done, she said. Want to take a moment to rest? No need. Let's continue. He said quickly and thought, if I take a rest, you'll surely find out the consequence of sitting in my neck. It's less tiring to do it all at once instead of lowering and lifting you each time. All right, the next one then, she said, and agreed that doing this quickly might be better than prolonging the sensation. By the time they were done with the last injector, Alan felt more tired than just from lifting her weight. He stood with his back at another console, and Asita got up from his shoulders. His neck tingled at the sudden cool sensation, and a waft of musky scent tickled his nether regions, together with his imagination. You're all sweaty, she said, and wiped his neck and shoulders quickly with her shirt. Wasn't it too much? No, I'll be fine, Alan said without looking at her, and resisting the desire to touch his neck and smell his fingers. He flexed his shoulders. Let's test fire one engine to make sure it can handle the new fuel mix. Yes, Asita said, and climbed down from the console, suppressing the itch from the top of her inner thighs rubbing against her. She activated the engine and manually fired it for 3 seconds at low power, then read the output on the console. It's not as efficient, but it works. I could get another few % from it if I fine-tune it. We don't really have the time for it, and I think it's better to not waste fuel on the small gain it might bring, Alan said and gave her a smile. I'm already satisfied that you got it working, but since you're smart, it was no surprise. She blushed and looked at the console and engine documentation quickly. Anyone with a bit of knowledge could have done this. Maybe, but I'm still happy you're here, he said. Let's tell Tynus the good news and eat. Asita noticed Tynus's reaction at home when she caught the scent from Alan's neck, despite hiding it. It embarrassed her, but she had smelled the change in Tynus as well the day before. Under normal circumstances at home, it was a natural thing and no big deal. But she could understand why Tynus had tried to hide it. Human noses weren't sensitive enough as far as she knew, but Alan's scent had changed as well, and she wondered if he had found out about them. He said nothing about it or rejected Tynus or tried to approach herself like Silthmales would have, so she figured he hadn't. There were more urgent matters at any rate. Alan suspected it was the intense schedule they worked at that caused the thicker smell of their fur in the air. He had increased the throughput of the environmental system, but it didn't compensate completely. It also didn't lessen the scent when they sat close and slept together. But he didn't think it was a bad thing when it seemed it both comforted and revitalized him. Engine test done, said Asita and marked the list of tasks they needed to perform. Replace damaged control circuitry, done. I finished rigging our home with cables. The current struts are secured by weak magnetic locks and should disconnect with little force, said Tynus. To be sure, Most cables should break to keep the pods from tearing apart if the ships do split too far. Alain nodded. Worst case, the two ships break apart, but our home is still attached to one side. I doubt it'll come to that, since they're fused together pretty tight. What's left? Testing the engine controls, said Asita. Since we don't know how the whole thing will react when we fire all engines, we'll have to wing it during the maneuver. I have a half-filled fuel pod sitting near a dock, Alain said. We'll divide it after the test when we know which side needs more. Tines looked at a flashing red notice on Alain's tablet, and a shiver ran down her spine. What's this? Alain looked at the tablet, then grabbed it at once. Hull breaches, he said while another notice appeared. We're getting hit early. But the debris is still at a distance, Asita said, knocking another tablet from the table as she took hers with the proximity detection output. Alain ground his teeth. The system must be ignoring projectiles that would have been deflected by the standard shield of the ship, and that's out of order. I'm such an idiot. No time to blame yourself, said Asita. We have to leave now. They rushed to their suits and their fingers trembled while trying to perform the suit check. Alain looked at Asita and Tines for a moment before putting on his helmet. Stay safe. Asita's heart pounded. You too. Tines looked worried and nodded quickly before putting on her helmet. They left the airlocks at both sides and hurried along the hull to enter the warships, while sparks flashed at some points in the distance. I'm inside, said Alain after he entered the service hatch. We're just getting inside, Asita said. Tines should reach the bridge in a few minutes, and I'll be at engineering 2 or 3 minutes after that. All right, I should have reached engineering here by that time, said Alain, and pushed and jumped through the corridors as fast as he could. Keep your suits on for safety. We will, said Asita. Tines reached the bridge of the Amaroth and activated gravity controls at the door. I'm on the bridge, she said, activating the controls in a moment. With a few button presses on the main console, all the other consoles on the circular bridge came alive. Moving fast from one to the other, she turned on the critical systems and confirmed their status. All systems are up, no irregularities. Good, said Asita, and activated the engineering systems. Everything seems to be fine at my end. Alain plunked down 2 portable terminals and hooked them up to the engineering console on the Walkyria. I'm powering up engineering here, he said, and opened the warship's back-end console. Engineering came alive along with the consoles on the bridge. Get ready to ignite the engines. A display projected the relative position of the warships in the solar system and the trajectory of the incoming debris onto a bare wall while Alain powered up the engines. Power up! Asita started the engines on the Amaroth, and a tremor ran through both warships. Powered up! Confirmed, said Tines, and jumped up at several sharp cracks near and far. More hits! Alain heard one behind him and saw flames spewing from one of the engine cases. Shit! What? Asked Asita. Alain rushed to shut down the engine. I only have 3 engines, but that should still be enough. The flight systems of the Walkyria turned green. Are you ready? Good to go here, said Tines. Same here, said Asita. Then on my mark, said Alain. Power at 1%. 3, 2, 1, mark. Asita and he hit thrust on the consoles, and another tremor ran through the ships. Asita monitored the engine output. Clear, she said. Clear, said Alain. I'm switching to reverse. Deflectors around the engine exhaust opened like flower petals and directed the thrust backwards. A continuous low tremble ran through the warships. We're moving, said Tines. Direction 374. Metallic pangs resonated through the hull. It's raining, said Tines. Increase power to 5% over the count of 10, Alain said, and adjusted the engine controls slowly while counting. Done, said Asita. Tines, roll to your right at 1 degree until we're at 43. We'll use the bottom of the ships as a shield. Yes, said Tines, and steered the ship into a rotation. We're moving at 13K with heading 369. Alain consulted his display. They couldn't divert too much from their current orbit, otherwise they'd drift away or fall into the sun's gravity well without the power to recover their position. Take heading 379, he said while adjusting the directional thrust of the Walkyria. The hulls groaned at the forces on both ships and the direction of the impacts moved slowly around the ships. A thunk and a muffled explosion caused another tremor through the Walkuria's hull. "Shit!" said Alain, and switched to a view of the outside of the ship. White smoke drifted from one of the loading bay doors. "Alain," called out Tinnes. "What happened? You're on fire!" "The spare fuel pod must have been hit in a bad way and ignited in the bay," Alain said, and activated the emergency systems around the bay. "Fire is spreading through several corridors. Can't you kill it by vacuum?" He typed commands on one terminal. "Too much damage. I can only open one corridor to space." A buzz from the other terminal demanded his attention. "Shit. One of the lines to the bridge has gone down. I'm on the backup line now." "Bad?" asked Asitha. "I will lose control if the fire spreads more. I need to stop it. Can we help?" Alain switched to the engine controls. "Open up a console on your tablet and listen on port 22. Asitha did so on her tablet. "Done." Alain typed more, and a moment later the engine controls of the Walkurea opened up on Asitha's tablet. "You have control of the Walkurea now. Increase power output to 8% slowly. We need to get away as fast as we can." He hurried out of engineering. "Tinnes, keep us in orbit." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to flush the fire." An alarm on the pilot's console took Tinnes's attention before she could speak. "Shaz, engine control failure. I've lost partial control of the ship." "I see it," said Asitha. "One of the circuits we replaced failed. I'll replace it." "No, you need to stay at engineering. I'll go," said Tinnes and rushed out of the bridge. "Keep the ship on course with the engines." Asitha placed her tablet on the engine console and adjusted the power output from both ships, while the hits from debris rang around her. Alain pushed himself through the service corridors close to the hull. The sight of holes in opposite walls reminded him of the risk of getting hit, but he had no time to be afraid. If control to the bridge was lost, they lost control of both ships. Heat radiating from reddening structures told him he was close to the bay and the main source of the fire. He avoided touching anything as much as possible, and only briefly if he had to. Sweat poured down his face as he caught sight of the service hatch leading to the corridor connected to the one on fire in the outer hatch. Another tremor ran through the ship and the wall behind him ruptured and belched out fire. Tinnes found one of the tool cases they had left around the ship with a few spare circuit boards and jumped through the corridors towards the failed controls. When she reached them, a burned-out mess of molten cables awaited her. "Lots of damage here. You'll have to fix it fast," said Asitha. "I can't increase the power of the engines to 8% without pushing us out of orbit." "Got it. I'll work as fast as I can." Alain groaned from the heat and climbed through the hot hatch, his suit covered in burn marks from touching any part of the structure. Dizzy spells came over him, and he forced himself to get to the outer hatch before passing out. "Alain," said Asitha. "Alain, are you all right?" "Almost there." He groaned and pushed himself once more towards the end. "Alain?" asked Tinnes. "You don't sound good." He caught the rung at the hatch in the locking wheel. "Just a little. Hot under the collar." He wheezed while turning the wheel to unlock the hatch. The hatch flew open from the air pressure, and he gripped the rung tight while sensing he'd lose conscious from the heat of the fire rushing past him. "Alain! Alain!" Tinnes called out after a loud static burst from his side. "Talk to us." "Tinnes," said Asitha. "Focus on your task. I'm sure he'll be fine." Tinnes clenched her jaw. She knew she had her own priority right now. "Yes," she said, and furiously cut the damaged cables. Asitha gripped the side of the console. "You'd better be fine, Alain," she thought. "I'm done," said Tinnes after a few minutes and hurried back to the bridge. There, she changed course as sharp as she dared without splitting the ships apart, and they shuddered while the engines made the correction. "We're back on course." "All right," said Asitha, and increased engine power, increasing the stress on the ships to the point of the groaning of the hulls drowning out the staccato of the debris impacts. "What's the status outside?" Tinnes switched views at an engineering console. "Our home has come loose, but it looks like the cables are holding," she said and switched views again. "Both ships look like they're still in the same position, and I see no more smoke at the Walkurea." She tried other cameras, but she couldn't get a better view of the bay where the fire erupted. "Alain! Alain! Can you hear me?" Alain groaned at the pounding inside his head. He remembered almost fainting and using all his willpower to reach into the front pocket of his suit. "Alan, please respond! Alan, please!" begged Tynes. He cleared his throat. "I'm still here," he said, and looked at the roll of tape wrapped around his wrist in the rung. Tynes and Asitha sighed in relief. "What happened?" "Fainted from the heat, but the suit cooled down a little now." He noticed sparks flying at the far side of the ship. "What's the status?" Tynes checked the pilot's console. "We're on course. Rotation of the ships is nearly completed, but there's quite some damage from the debris shower at the bottom of the Amaranth. Running at 8% power now, but we had a delay when we lost control for a while." "So," said Asitha and looked at her tablet. Engines on both ships seemed to run fine. Alan untangled his hand and crawled back up the hot corridor, the slowly cooling metal creaking at every side. "Fuel status?" Asitha checked. "A little more than anticipated, but still on the safe side." "How much longer before we're out of the target radius?" Tynes checked the different clocks. 4 hours and 23 minutes without counting the delay. Hang in there, with a little luck we'll come out unharmed. The impacts of the debris lessened over time, and Alain only felt relief when they were outside the projected radius, and no more damage was registered for half an hour. "I think we're safe now," he said. "We can reverse thrust." "Asitha, power down on my mark." "Tynes, reverse engine thrust next, and then we can power up again to brake." No more words were exchanged during the braking maneuver, and the anxiety at the groaning and creaking resonating through the hull, until Tynes spoke up again. "We're back in original orbit and speed," she said, and sighed in relief. "Power down," said Alan and Asitha, and he powered down the engines from the last 2% thrust. He wanted to sit down and drink, but they had to make sure their home was intact first. "Tynes, how's our home?" Tynes had already switched views. "Still there, and doesn't seem damaged." "Let's go home then," Asitha said. She and Tynes were the first to arrive, and with a little effort they returned their home to its original place and secured the struts to the warship's hulls. An inspection inside revealed no leaks, and they were glad to get out of their suits and hugged each other tight. "We made it," sighed Asitha. Tynes slumped down into the couch and looked around at the mess on the floor, where anything not bolted down had spilled. "If you don't mind, we'll leave the cleanup till later." Asitha picked up a bottle and glasses and slumped down next to her. "I'm with you." Tynes looked up a little. "Alain, where are you?" "Almost there. I had to take a look at the gardens and the storerooms. I had to know for sure if there was any damage, and luckily they're intact." He arrived shortly after, and Asitha hugged him tight when he entered the living. "I'm so glad we're all safe," she said. "Same here," he said, and rubbed her back. Tynes smiled shyly when Asitha let go. "I'm happy you're all right." He chuckled and reached out to her. "Come here." She blushed but moved closer, and after an initial hesitation, hugged him tight, and he rubbed her back. "I don't think I could have survived this if it wasn't for you two." Asitha joined the hug. "Nor we without you." They stood there until stomachs began to rumble, and they laughed away the tension. "I want to eat until I'm totally stuffed and drink until I can't lift my glass anymore," Alain said. "Not just you," said Asitha, and headed over to the kitchen to pick up utensils. "We have something to seriously celebrate."